What if I told you that the most active, bite-filled spot on the entire lake is probably the absolute worst place to catch a trophy fish? Sounds wrong, doesn't it? We're all taught that action is good, that bites mean you're in the right place. But today, we're going to tear that old rule book apart. We're talking about that secret spot your buddy told you about, the one where he slayed 'em all day. I promise you, by the end of this video, you'll understand why that spot is likely a complete waste of your time if you're hunting for a personal best. We're going to expose the trophy spot trap and reveal the simple, biological reason why you're only catching dinks there. So, let me ask you this before we dive in, and be honest in the comments. Have you ever spent a whole day on a hot spot and left feeling like you just ran a daycare for tiny fish? Let's get into it. This whole idea is so important because it taps into a core frustration every serious angler feels. We spend a lot of money on gear, a lot of time on the water, and a lot of hope on every single cast. When a trusted friend gives you a tip, you take it as gospel. You motor over there, full of confidence, expecting to battle a monster. The belief is simple. Where there are small fish, there must be big fish. It's a logical assumption, but in the world of predator and prey, it's a dangerously flawed one. For years we've operated under this more is better mindset. We see our fish finder light up, we get a dozen bites in an hour, and we pat ourselves on the back. But we're celebrating the wrong thing. We're stuck in a loop, fishing the same types of spots over and over because the constant action gives us a false sense of success. Today, we break that loop. Let's start by painting a picture you know all too well. It's 5:30 in the morning, the fog is just starting to lift off the water. Your phone buzzes, it's your buddy, Dave. He sends you a pin with the message, "Dude, they are stacked in here, non-stop action yesterday." That's the magic phrase, isn't it? Non-stop action. Your heart starts pumping a little faster. You ditch your original game plan, chug your coffee, and make a beeline for Dave's secret spot. You're imagining a giant bass smashing your topwater lure, the kind of fish that makes your whole week. This is the setup, the promise of an epic day handed to you on a silver platter. You're not thinking about fish behavior or lake structure. You're just thinking about the tip from a guy you trust. This is the moment the trap is set, and you are walking right into it with a smile on your face and a full tackle box, completely unaware of the predictable disappointment that's waiting for you. You finally arrive at the spot. It's a beautiful little cove filled with submerged brush and lily pads. It looks perfect, exactly like the cover of a fishing magazine. You cut the engine and just listen for a second. You hear the telltale pops and slurps of small fish feeding. The confidence is through the roof. You rig up your go-to lure, a weightless Senko, and make that first perfect cast right along the edge of the pads. It hasn't even settled for 3 seconds before your line gives that satisfying tick and starts swimming off. You reel down, set the hook, and there's no power, there's no head shake. You just reel in a feisty but ultimately tiny 8-inch bass. You chuckle, unhook it, and tell yourself, well, at least they're active. That first little fish isn't a disappointment, it's a confirmation, but it's a confirmation of the wrong thing. You think you've confirmed you're in the right spot, but all you've really confirmed is that you're in the nursery. So you make another cast, this time to a small opening in the brush pile. Bam! Another fish almost instantly. This one might be 9 inches, maybe 10 if you stretch him. For the next hour, this is your life. Cast, bite, reel in a dink, cast, bite, reel in another dink. The initial excitement starts to fade, replaced by a strange mix of satisfaction and frustration. On one hand, you're catching a ton of fish. You're not getting skunked. You can honestly tell your buddy, yeah man, they were biting. But on the other hand, this isn't what you came for. You're not a numbers guy, you're a trophy hunter. Each small fish is like a tiny little reminder that the giant you're looking for isn't here. This is the pattern. This is the core experience of the trophy spot trap. It keeps you there with constant, meaningless action, preventing you from going out and hunting for the one single bite that actually matters. Let's put a name to what's happening. You are fishing in what biologists and seasoned anglers call a nursery. This isn't a feeding ground for giants, it's a daycare for fish. These are areas that offer two critical things for small, juvenile fish: safety and an abundance of tiny food. Think about it from their perspective. When you're only 8 inches long, everything wants to eat you. Bigger bass, pike, walleye, birds, everything. So, your number one priority is not getting eaten. You need to hang out in places where a big predator can't easily maneuver. Dense weed beds, shallow, tangled brush piles, and tight spaces around docks are perfect for this. They can dart in and out of the cover, safe from the big jaws of a 5-pounder. These spots are not chosen by big fish. They are chosen by small fish for reasons that have nothing to do with what a mature, trophy-sized predator is looking for. So why are all these little guys packed in here like sardines? It all comes down to survival. As we just mentioned, safety is number one. The dense cover is like a fortress for them. A big, mature bass is often more of a lone wolf or runs in a small pack of similar-sized fish. They're not built for weaving through a thicket of branches. They're built for open water ambushes. Number two is the food source. What do small fish eat? They eat tiny things, aquatic insects, microscopic zooplankton, and very small minnows. And where do you find that kind of food? In shallow, fertile, weedy areas. So these nursery spots are essentially an all-inclusive resort for young fish. They have a 5-star security system and an all-you-can-eat buffet of tiny snacks. It's the perfect place for them to grow, and the absolute worst place to find their much, much larger grandparents. Now here is the critical piece of the puzzle that most people miss. The big fish know exactly where these nurseries are. They are absolutely aware that these spots are filled with bite-sized snacks. But a wise old 5-pound bass didn't get that big by being stupid. It didn't survive for years by recklessly charging into a shallow, tangled mess where it's vulnerable. Instead, it plays a different game. The big fish are the wolves circling the flock of sheep. They aren't in the middle of the flock. They are on the outside, waiting. They position themselves on the perimeter, on the first deep water break line just outside the cove, or holding on an isolated piece of cover nearby. They wait for one of those little fish to make a mistake, to venture just a few feet too far from safety. That is their meal. So while you're in the middle of the nursery, catching dinks, the real trophy is sitting 20 yards behind you, watching and waiting. This brings us to a huge myth we need to bust right now. The idea that more bites equals a better spot. We are psychologically wired to crave feedback. A bite is positive feedback. It tells our brain, hey, what you're doing is working, keep doing it. A dozen bites in an hour feels way more successful than 0 bites in an hour. But if you're hunting for a 10-pound bass, you have to completely rewire your definition of success. Success isn't action. Success is putting your lure in a place where a giant is likely to be, even if that means you have to wait for 3 hours for a single bite. Chasing the constant action of small fish is a fool's errand. It's like a professional deer hunter spending his whole season chasing squirrels because they're easier to find. You have to ignore the noise and focus on the signal. The dinks are the noise, the trophy is the signal, and it's often very, very quiet. Okay, so how can you spot one of these dinkfest spots before you waste 3 hours fishing it? There are some classic telltale signs. First, look for extremely shallow, thick cover that is very close to the bank. Think of those coves that are almost choked out with lily pads or seaweed. Second, pay attention to the type of forage you see. If you see clouds of tiny, thumbnail-sized baitfish dimpling the surface everywhere, that's food for small fish, not for a lunker. A true trophy wants a 6-inch bluegill or a big gizzard shad. Third, and this is a big one, is accessibility. If the spot is super obvious and easy for anyone with a boat to get to, chances are it gets a ton of fishing pressure. Heavy pressure is the #1 enemy of big, old, smart fish. They will abandon these community holes and find quieter, less obvious places to live. And we have to talk about fishing pressure. Think about how your buddy Dave found this spot. He probably just pulled into a likely-looking cove and started catching fish. He got excited and now he's telling you. You'll get excited and tell someone else. These spots become community holes almost overnight. A big, mature fish is incredibly sensitive to pressure. It can sense the vibration of trolling motors, the sound of lures splashing down, and the sight of shadows overhead. After being caught and released once or twice, it learns to associate these things with danger. So, while the young, dumb, and hungry juvenile fish will keep biting day after day, the wise old giant will either move out of the area completely or become almost entirely nocturnal, feeding only under the safety of darkness. The spot may have held big fish at one point, but the pressure created by the non-stop action has effectively pushed them out. Now let's be fair to your buddy, Dave. He's probably not lying to you. He's just misinterpreting the evidence. For a lot of casual fishermen, a day of catching 30 small fish is a huge success. It's fun, it's engaging, and it makes for a good story. He's not looking at it with the critical eye of a trophy hunter. He feels the bites, he sees the fish, and he concludes this is a hot spot. He doesn't have the context to understand the difference between a nursery and a true trophy lair. So when he gives you that tip, it's with the best of intentions. The failure isn't in his observation, it's in his analysis. The key is for you to learn to take that information and filter it through this new lens. You have to learn to hear non-stop action and immediately think, okay, that's probably a nursery. Now, where would a big fish be positioned to ambush that nursery? This is the turning point. We've established that the big ones aren't in the middle of the Dinkfest, so the million-dollar question is, where are they? The answer is, they are somewhere nearby in a position of strategic advantage. A big fish is all about energy conservation. It doesn't want to waste energy chasing down 1,000 tiny minnows. It wants to sit in one spot, wait for a substantial meal to make a mistake and then explode on it. This means they will relate to structure that is adjacent to the nursery, but fundamentally different. They are looking for ambush points. They are looking for places that offer them cover and concealment with easy access to both deep, safe water and the shallow feeding areas. You need to stop thinking about being in the cover and start thinking about the edges and transitions. To really understand this, you have to get inside the head of a trophy fish. A mature bass, walleye, or pike has a fundamentally different mentality than its younger relatives. It's a survivor. It's often a loner or travels in a very small school of other giants. They don't need the safety of a large group or the protection of dense, shallow cover. They are the apex predators. They are confident and cautious. Their entire day is structured around a few key things: safety, energy conservation, and high-protein meals. They aren't going to hang out in the chaotic, high-traffic environment of the nursery. They prefer a quieter, more strategic location where they can observe and control their environment. Think of them as the seasoned old veterans of the lake. They let the young recruits do all the running around while they sit back and wait for the perfect opportunity. Let's use an analogy. Imagine a big office building. The nursery spot with all the small fish is like the mail room or the intern pool on the first floor. It's chaotic, full of energy, and there's a lot of activity. But the CEO isn't down there. The CEO is up in the corner office on the top floor. It's quiet, has a strategic view of everything, and is much harder to get to. Your job as a trophy angler is to stop fishing in the mailroom. You need to find the CEO's office. On a lake, this means you need to look for the key pieces of structure that a dominant fish would use as its personal headquarters. These are the prime pieces of real estate that offer the best combination of safety, food, and strategic advantage. And just like a corner office, there aren't very many of them, so you have to know what you're looking for. So what does this CEO's office look like in the real world? We're talking about specific types of structures. The most classic example is the main lake point. A long point that extends way out into the lake and drops off into deep water is prime real estate. A big fish can sit on the deep edge and slide up shallow to feed when the time is right, then quickly retreat to safety. Other key spots are isolated, offshore humps, or rock piles. These are magnets for big fish because they are their own little ecosystem, away from the pressure of the bank. And don't forget about channel edges. The edge of an old river or creek channel that runs through the lake is like a highway for big fish. They use these channels to travel, and they will hold on any little turn or irregularity along that edge. These spots often look boring on the surface, but they are where the giants live. Another massive piece of the puzzle is the forage connection. I mentioned it briefly, but it's worth its own block. Little fish eat little things. Big fish eat big things. It's that simple. While the dinks in the nursery are chasing insects and tiny minnows, a 5-pound bass is looking for a 5-inch bluegill, a big yellow perch, or a 10-inch gizzard shade. You need to figure out what the primary big fish forage is in your lake and where that forage lives. Often these larger baitfish will suspend in open water or relate to the same deep structures the big bass do, like points and humps. If you can find the preferred food source of a trophy, you will find the trophy. Stop thinking about matching the hatch for the tiny fish. Start thinking about what the absolute biggest meal in the lake is, and then imitate that. This all leads to the hardest part of this entire process, changing your own mindset. It requires a fundamental shift from valuing action to valuing patience. This is incredibly difficult for most anglers. Our instincts scream at us to go where the fish are biting. Sitting on a deep, offshore point for 2 hours without a single tap on your line can be mentally grueling. You start to doubt yourself. You start to think, I should just go back to that cove where I was getting bites. This is the test. The ability to resist that urge and trust your strategy is what separates good anglers from great trophy hunters. You have to accept that you might only get 1 or 2 bites all day, but you also have to believe that one of those bites could be the fish of a lifetime. It's a high-risk, high-reward game, and it requires mental toughness. Let me give you a concrete, real-life example of this in action. Last fall, a friend gave me a tip on a spot. It was a classic nursery, a big, shallow flat covered in dead weeds. I went there first thing, and just as he said, caught a dozen small bass in an hour. But I knew better. I pulled up my lake map on my fish finder and looked for the closest, most significant piece of structure. About 100 yards offshore, there was a sharp point on the old creek channel, where the depth dropped from 12 feet to 25 feet. It looked like nothing from the surface, just open, empty water. I left the chaos of the shallow flat and motored over to this spot. I idled over it, marked a few big, individual arches on my sonar, and then I anchored, and I waited. For over an hour, nothing happened, not a single bite. The wind was calm, the sun was bright, and the temptation to run back to the action spot was immense. I was about to give up. I decided to make one last cast with a big, slow-moving swim bait. I let it sink all the way to the bottom in 20 feet of water and began a painfully slow retrieve. About halfway back to the boat, I felt a thump that was so heavy I thought I had snagged the bottom. But then the bottom started moving. It wasn't the frantic, zippy fight of a small fish. It was a slow, powerful, head-shaking battle. After a few minutes, I slid the net under a beautiful 6-pound largemouth. One fish. But that one fish was bigger than the last 20 I had caught combined. That is the payoff. That is the reward for ignoring the trap and trusting the strategy. Now, this doesn't mean you should completely ignore those nursery spots. They actually provide you with a very valuable piece of information. They are a giant flashing sign that says, the food is here. You can use them as a starting point for your investigation. Instead of fishing in the nursery, start thinking of it as the center of a target. Your job is to fish the outer rings of that target. Start by fishing the very edge of the weed line. Then back off and fish the first drop-off. Then use your electronics to find the nearest isolated piece of cover, like a single boulder or a small rock pile that's sitting between the nursery and deep water. The big fish will use these isolated spots as staging areas. You can use the nursery as a clue to solve the puzzle instead of treating it as the final destination. So here is the final test, the challenge I'm giving to you. The next time you go out fishing, whether your buddy gives you a tip or you find a spot on your own, that is just teeming with small fish, I want you to stop. Don't spend more than 10 minutes there. Instead, I want you to pull out your map, turn on your electronics, and force yourself to spend the next hour fishing the 3 closest, most logical trophy structures nearby. Fish the nearest deep point, fish the closest channel swing, fish that isolated rock pile you've ignored 100 times. I want you to consciously and deliberately ignore the easy bites and hunt for the hard one. It will feel strange at first, but I guarantee that when you finally connect with a fish in one of those spots, it will fundamentally change the way you approach fishing forever. So, let's bring it all home. We've established that the buzzing, action-packed hotspot is often a trap, a nursery designed for the survival of small fish, not a hunting ground for giants. The biggest takeaway, the real aha moment, is understanding that big fish and small fish live in different neighborhoods for very specific reasons. The big ones are not in the daycare, they're circling it. They are on the adjacent, strategic, and often boring-looking pieces of structure. This knowledge is a game changer because it allows you to stop wasting your most valuable asset, time. It empowers you to look at a lake not as a collection of random spots, but as a strategic map of predator and prey. You can finally stop chasing the noise of 100 tiny bites and start listening for the quiet signal of one giant one. Thank you so much for watching and for being willing to challenge old habits. If this video helped you, please hit that like button, and if you haven't already, subscribe for more content that cuts through the noise. And for my final question, I want to hear your stories. What is the biggest fishing lie or piece of common wisdom you've ever been told? Let's get a conversation going in the comments below. See you on the water.